We now move on to the next plenary of the summit entitled Sustaining the Gains of India's Financial Inclusion Journey for Meaningful Usage of Financial Services by Women. This fireside chat will not only identify substantial gaps in providing financial inclusion to women, but also the solutions for the same. May I invite on stage Dr. Pawan Bakshi, India Lead Inclusive Financial Systems, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and also our esteemed speakers. Meanwhile, I'll request all of you to please kindly have your seats. Please be seated. Please join me in welcoming the esteemed moderator of the session and the esteemed panelists. We warmly welcome Ms. Sophie Certain, Chief Executive Officer, the Consultative Group to Assist the Poor, that is CGAP, and Ms. Mary Ellen Iskendrian, President and Chief Executive Officer, Women's World Banking. A very warm welcome to all of you. I now hand it over the charge of this fireside chat to the host. Dr. Bakshi, it's over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And I have the pleasure of having here on stage with me two global champions of change for women and inclusion for women. And I'm happy at this opportunity to be able to engage to you, with you both. I know that you're also our partners, so that's. I think a dual responsibility, but here I think for the benefit of all the audiences here, we've been seeing a lot of change in the country in the last couple of years, from the time, 10 years ago, when they started the program on the PMJDY. Uh, there has been a focus on inclusion of women as well across account opening, insurance, and credit, and everything else around it, which is now reached a stage where it's a groundswell, and everything else is coming in together. Uh, I wanted to keep the conversation amongst this by saying, how are you seeing stuff? And I'm going to ask a couple of questions. We start off with questions. I hope it remains as a conversation instead of us stopping abruptly and getting into stuff. But the key is that we've seen a lot of stuff happen. We've seen the role of technology enter. We've seen institutions changing their vision and their ability to serve women equally well. We've seen a whole lot of changes around uh, asking questions around, uh, will this work for the women, right? That was a huge change from a time when we said, hey, you know what, our technology and everything else that we do is agnostic to gender, right? And agnostic to gender meant it's gender blind. It didn't it and it since it was it was designed by men, it got only designed for men, right? And we excluded it with a bias out there. But things now are changing. So, Mary Ellen, I'm going to ask you the first question, to start off the conversations. In your global work, uh, which other countries do women have almost equal bank account access as compared with men? And what do you think India has done differently to achieve zero access gap for gender?
Well, first of all, Pavan, it is lovely to be here with you, and we are very grateful to be a partner of the Gates Foundation, and really wonderful. Thank you for bringing me together with Sophie. We were just realizing it had been a couple of years since we'd been able to see each other in person. I think this whole conference should be about India taking a victory lap in terms of not only access, but the point that you were making, the equality and of access between the genders. You know, in the global south, we have some countries where unfortunately there is parity, but it's parity at very low levels of inclusion. And so they almost don't feel like relevant cases for us to be discussing. So when we had talked about this earlier, and you'd said, where else are you working? We're seeing in Indonesia, for example, a really strong push on the part of the government to close that gap. But when they calculate inclusion, they include joint bank accounts as as women having access. And we have just seen in so many cases, and there's some really brilliant research that's been done over the years, that it is that individual account in her name that really makes the difference. In fact, Pavan was recounting to me that we're starting to see more and more women now changing the original cell phone number that was on their original Aadhaar account, which was perhaps their husband's phone number. Now they have their own phone, they have their own account, and they want that recognition. So the DPI and the very thoughtful, systematic infrastructure for digital that India has put in place is really bearing fruit. And I think it's really quite a unique situation in terms of gender parity with access. I think this conversation will start getting into usage questions, which, the story isn't quite as rosy there, but let's as I say, take a victory lap on the parity of access question.
Thanks, Marilyn. So, we asking you a question now because of the work that you've gone and done. We've seen market failures arise because high cost to serve, exclusion happens there, or they perceive risks in a different way. And since most women did not have the data, they were seen riskier and stuff like that. What innovative interventions and regulatory approaches have you seen, or do you think that it might work, which might change this ecosystem?
Thank you very much. First, I want to, repeat what you said, putting it in an international context where we often advise governments and are asked what is the best practice to enhance financial inclusion in general for women. And of course, the DPI model of India has become, in a way, the gold standard to establish the rails for financial inclusion. So I could not agree more with the fact that this really has changed the landscape. Now, as you said, and as your question points to, the journey doesn't stop here. I think the vision of the government was really that data and digital innovations would be leveraged by all actors, from the public to the private sector, from the large banks to the smaller fintechs and MFIs, by leveraging these rails. And I think that this is happening largely, but it is not happening to provide the usage and the depth of financial inclusion that India deserves and wants to achieve for all its citizens. And when I say depth, I mean access to other products than an account. Now, what are the digital innovation you're asking, or the market failures that are preventing that? I think at the heart of the matter is a lack of access, a lack of data, access to data, especially gender disaggregated data. Because seeing a woman as a profitable business opportunity for a financial institution requires understanding her needs and her specificities as a customer, which requires access to gender disaggregated data. And in my opinion, in a way, if you think about the India stacks, that's the missing stack. That's the stack that should come at the top of the DPR architecture. We should have access to gender disaggregated data that enables to use the DPI generated innovation and data for women.
Great, thank you. Both of you have gone in and spoken about usage, right? And I'll come back to you, Mariel, now. In your work in India and elsewhere that you've seen, what we've seen is, a high number of accounts are inactive or dormant. A lot of them also belong to women. What do you think can be done in terms of what do you think are the key issues or challenges, and what do you think can address that as we go along?
So, one thing that we've seen in our work globally, and it always kind of comes as a surprise, there are so many different cultures, so many different, sets of norms that exist in the different countries that we work in. But surprisingly, the things that really turn out to be barriers to women's financial inclusion are remarkably similar from country to country. And one thing that we persistently see is a lack of awareness on the part of women of what their options are, what they actually have access to. We know in the very early days of the PMJDY, there were actually, government benefits transfers that had been made into, that had been deposited into accounts that women were not even aware had been made on their behalf. So I think we're still making up time, making up progress in that level of awareness. And once they are aware, then are they comfortable, particularly when you add the digital element? Are they comfortable? Are they confident navigating the technology once they have access to it? So issues of financial and digital literacy still remain really important. The other thing, when Sophie was talking about, needing access to data in order to design products, one thing again that we've seen for years, again, just tremendous similarities that women everywhere seems somehow, regardless of socioeconomic status, are time starved. So convenience, a product that meets the woman where she is, rather than making her go to a branch or making it difficult for her to physically access the product, is really job one. Security, feeling safe, feeling a sense that her money is safe, that she is safe in interacting with the product. We saw a fascinating study coming out of the BIS. No one would ever say that the BIS is a bastion of gender champions, but that they were finding that women were willing to pay more for financial products and services if they knew that they were safe, that their data was safe. So that security issue is really paramount. And then the last thing that we, again, see everywhere, women want confidentiality. They want to be able to keep their business, their transactions to themselves. They don't necessarily want their neighbors to know. They don't want their husbands or their brothers or their other family members to know. And so when you combine those three things and you think about that, those prerequisites in your product design, you're going to be much, much more likely to be able to reach that woman client. And then the one other thing that I'll touch on, but I think we'll probably talk a bit more as we go on in the conversation, is thinking about the channel and who is the interlocutor, who is that woman engaging with. And we've seen just tremendous success in our work here in India in training women business correspondents, and particularly the BC Sakis, women who come out of the community that understand the lived experience of their clients. And there's just a level of trust that gets built at a much earlier stage.
Great. Thanks. Thanks so much, Mary Ellen. To you, Sophie, what we've seen is a lot of research and segmentation research and everything else, and usage research has gone and shown. That's too loud, or do I need?
No, that's
Need
good.
to be
I can
So,
even hear you better now.
oh, really? Okay. I'm sorry. So, what we've seen is that most women who get included to start using the products get stuck at the bottom of the usage pattern. They use the most basic things of either depositing or cashing in or cashing out, as they call it. What do you think needs to get done to get them to use more, both in terms of frequency and in terms of variety of products? What do you think is needed?
Thank you for that question. I think first we need to start seeing the variety of Indian women. When we think about financial inclusion, we tend to associate it with the woman who is in a self-help group in a rural area and borrows as part of a group process. But today, with the progress of the economy in the country and digitization, we really have many more archetypes of Indian women that can really be served and economically empowered by financial inclusion. You have the lady who lives in an urban or peri-urban area, is digitally savvy, but indeed only uses transaction accounts, for instance, to sell and buy on a platform or in a gig economy. You have the nano entrepreneur, you have the micro owner of a business. There's many less of these women than men, but still they represent 14% of micro businesses. That's really not insignificant. Their needs are also very different, and they're typically digitally savvy. And then you have, still in the SAG landscape, women at the top of the pyramid that are really ready to grow from group borrowing to individual borrowing. So first, I think we need to really broaden our vision of who these women are that we are trying to save, to serve, sorry, and really see the potentials are much more diverse than before. Now, in terms of the products that they need, clearly they need product that will enable their entrepreneurship, that will enable their economic contribution. And that means access to savings, but also, and the sustainability of their businesses. So access to savings, but also access to different sorts of credit. Credit that will enable to start their businesses, to manage their businesses with working capital, not term loans, as is mostly available, and also capital enhancing products. They need micro pension because longevity is increasing. They need insurance because they face an increasing number of risk. And they need assets, capital, and investment solutions. How do we get there? I truly believe in digitization, and I know we need to accompany digitization with financial literacy, with a lot of business and non-financial services to accompany them. But if you take a value chain in which a woman is active as a nano entrepreneur, digitize the value chain, including her small business, she will start generating more data trails, more varied data trails that will give us information about the frequency, the quality, and the amount of her cash flows. That should enable much more diverse financial inclusion for that woman. And I think we need to think in the same way for the other groups. We can digitize SAG records or SAG proceedings. The first archetype of lady is already digitally active. Let's just innovate in terms of how we leverage those digital data trails to offer her more tailored products, as you said, is so important. Tailored products to her cash flow abilities and to her needs.
Great. Thanks so much. I think one question which will come to you both, because it's an important one, is around trust and confidence, right? What we are seeing is increasing amount of fraud happening, scams happening on the payment systems. Most people struggle with, if I have a problem, where do I go and report? And basic kind of issues. Women, we believe, are impacted much more with them, right? Because they are the savers of the family, and they are the ones who start building assets for the family and stuff like that at the back end. What measures do you think the market players or the regulators or the government needs to take to ensure that there is a higher level of confidence and trust? And this is aimed at you both, so you guys can choose who wants to go first.
Okay, well, let me give it a start, because I think it does. At the end of the day, I think it is going to be the biggest mountain we have to climb if we really are going to include women at parity with men in the formal system. We see everywhere we work that women do take longer to make financial decisions. They ask for more information. They think a lot more about and ponder a lot more before they decide to make a decision to move forward with a financial service provider. But once you have gained their trust, there's, again, a huge amount of data that's showing women to be really good, very loyal clients for financial service providers. And we all know that it is much more expensive to acquire a new client than it is to retain an existing client that you can then cross-sell to. In developed markets, women are 60% more likely to be a client of a financial service provider 5 years after she initially becomes a client, and she's much more likely to be amenable to cross-selling of products. And we see particularly insurance products sell very well to women. Again, very much a trust-based product. And when I was alluding earlier to the BC Sakis and the women agents, we just have seen a very clear, frankly, outperformance of these women agents because of the ability to build trust, quite frankly, with both men and women clients. One thing that I never really knew that was a thing for men, but we've had men say, especially with digital financial services, I don't really want a male agent to know that I don't know how to do something on my phone. If I have to ask kind of a stupid question about technology, I'd rather ask a woman than I'd ask a man. And they rate the women very highly on their ability to understand the technical and explain the technical elements. But we saw right across the board, we saw that women agents here in India were booking 19% more transactions on a monthly basis than their male counterparts. They had a 45%, that's almost, half as much better rate of conversion from signing up for an account to then actively using that account. And we saw 59% higher cross-sell rates. So I really do believe that women agents, women as peer colleagues in the journey to formal financial access is part of that, as part of the solution, part of building that trust.
I could not agree more with what you said. I think women agents play a critical digital and financial literacy role. But I want to take a more macro perspective, because I could not agree more with what you said too, which is that the number and size of risk is increasing incredibly fast, faster than usage itself. And it takes many different forms, from cybersecurity to data thefts to simple scams and frauds, and to mistakes also by first-time users. So we think that what you really need is to elevate the standards for consumer protection and financial literacy across the ecosystem of players, and really strengthen that part, because I agree with you, that's where the rubber hits the road, that's where we will gain the trust or not. And everybody who works in finance knows that it takes years to rebuild once you lose the trust of customers. So we think that we need, first, many actors to realize that they have a role to play. It's not just for the RBI, the regulator, to be in charge of market conduct. You need the consumer protection agencies, the data protection agencies, but also the telecom regulator if you have mobile money, but also the financial players themselves, to realize that they need to behave in a responsible manner, that it is in their interest to maintain that trust and that client base that they've established. I always use the analogy that the seatbelt was not invented by the regulator, it was invented by Volvo. So the financial services players, providers, they also know how to enhance the security of their systems. And there's many different things that can be done. I think technology can also help, not just the regulator by having sub-tech instruments, media monitoring, social media monitoring, etc., to enhance their ability to monitor risk, but also at the level of financial services providers, transparency on the app, very clear explanations of terms and conditions, chatbots where the client can ask questions about the products they're about to get into, using technology to accelerate and facilitate and decrease the cost of small claim handling, for instance. All of this needs to be part of the panoply of things we put in place.
Great, thank you. I think at least a clock shows we've got less than 4 minutes to go. So we are standing in between the audience and the lunch. So I'm going to ask you one last question, right? You've both spoken about the use of data and data which can be disaggregated at the gender level, at usage level, at geography level, and everything else around that. What do you think, and this is again aimed at the two of you, though I had promised I wouldn't do that, but it's an important one. So, so I have to push it towards both of you. What do you think should be the metrics that we should be tracking? Because the key is that everybody goes and reports the number of accounts that we have and the balances which we have, because that's what the banks are accustomed to doing. But are those the right kind of metrics that we should be tracking, or do you think there's time for us to change that and start reporting something else? So,
All right.
so that we
Well,
start.
this is a real soapbox issue for me. I thank you so much for giving me a moment to step up and complain. But I'm all for tracking whatever metrics are the ones that we want to track. But then we have to use the data. We're collecting data that if financial service providers really look at that data and make business decisions, they will see that women are not riskier customers. This idea that somehow, we can't lend at the same size without guarantees, without a support from a spouse is truly a misconception. We're working with a digital lender here in India, and we found that even with higher average loan sizes for women-led SMEs, and we had to push really hard to get this company to up the average loan size. They had better repayment rates, and what was really important was that we did a long-term customer lifetime value. When you brought loan sizes to parity with men, you had a 30% higher customer lifetime value from that woman client who was getting the same loan size as the men. But you were repeatedly seeing lower loan approval rates. There were higher rejection rates of women credits. So I'm maybe not answering the question you asked directly about what the measures are, but let's be serious about using the data we're collecting to make real decisions and not continue to perpetuate misconceptions.
This is also a question that I love because we've been developing at CGAP a vision that we call Financial Inclusion 2.0, which is really about going beyond seeing financial inclusion goals as enabling access to account and really going beyond. And that means also measuring different things. We always knew that financial inclusion was a name to an end. Financial inclusion is about unleashing the power of access to finance for every citizen in terms of building resilience, in terms of empowering them to seize economic opportunity, build entrepreneurship, even adapt to climate change, and so on. And so I think that's where we need to move measurement towards. And I think towards outcomes, towards the difference that financial inclusion makes in a person's life. And I think that applies at all levels. We need the highest level global databases like Findex to get us to measure more impact and also the depth of financial inclusion. We need to go beyond accounts and simple products. But we need to also have governments use that in their compasses, financial institutions to use that in their dashboards. I think one additional, and investors, impact investors, I still see everywhere measures focusing on volumes and number of customers. We really need to go beyond and try to see what difference, what real impact we're creating. And I think one opportunity we have, and especially in India, is to use the richness of data that is being generated by the UPI. You now have transaction data that crosses across your population, and that you can probably, through very simple algorithm with machine learning, you probably don't even need AI, to really analyze impact by crossing different databases at individual level. And I think that's the future of financial inclusion. Let's be ambitious and outcome-oriented.
Great. One last thing. So we have all stakeholders here. We have people from the government. We have the industry. We have the regulators. I think they're still here. If there was one message that you had to give them all, what would change the trajectory of what we're trying to do, what would that be? Very quickly.
Collect gender disaggregated data, add gender as a line item in the RBI Financial Inclusion Index, and then use it.
Continue being the gold standard in developing the vision for the rails, the DPI rails that unleash financial inclusion, including the additional layers of gender disaggregated data.
Thank you so much. This has been really, really great. I mean, it was a pleasure, listening to you both now, and I hope the audience also enjoyed it. So, Marilyn, thank you so much for being here and
No,
talking
thank
to
you,
us, and Sophie, thanks to you as well. Really appreciate your time and effort to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, esteemed panelists. Thank you to the anchor of the Fireside Chat. It's been an absolutely enjoyable chat. We'd like to give you a small token of our appreciation and thanks. Please do collect them on your way. And may I request you to join us front and center for a photo op.